Thelma used to ask me to not go to the basement. She used to say she'll find out if I ever did. So I listened carefully. I just wanted to make my mama happy. Yes, that's who she was. My new mama. I was nothing before I met Thelma. I was your average foster boy from somewhere shitty in the Midwest. My mom, if I could call her that, well, she was a hooker. So literally anyone that paid her $25 could have been my dad. She gave me away a few hours after I was born, and I never saw her ever since. I grew up with different foster families. The Riveras, the Bushes, the Carters, the Smiths, you name them. Some were good, and of course some were bad. But you know what? I don't like to think about that. And going back to what actually matters, let me introduce you to Thelma. Now, I don't really know how I ended up with her, but I have pretty vague memories of this summer day while I was living with the Riveras. Martha and Tulio Rivera were a Mexican couple who had 2 children, Maggie and Carlos. And the boy and I spent a lot of time together. We enjoyed killing birds. In fact, we were dissecting a pigeon that afternoon. And yes, before I met Thelma, I was an awful kid. As I was cutting the pigeon, I looked up and suddenly saw her. This tall woman with long red hair wearing sunglasses. She stood across from our house next to a very big tree, smiling at me, almost as if she was encouraging me to continue dismantling the bird. And aside from that, everything else was normal during that day. However, the weird thing happened the very next day. I was awakened by Tulio, who told me to pick up my stuff quickly. My mind was going everywhere. I was confused and disappointed, but not surprised. I knew what it all meant. They were done with me. Classic foster families. Once I grabbed all my belongings and went downstairs, I got the surprise of my life. The woman from the day before was standing in the middle of the living room. Tulio practically handed me to her, and without any questions, this lady and I walked away. And I questioned myself for many years why they gave me away. They always seemed to like me, and to be honest, it wasn't the trashiest family I had. I guess you could call them the good ones. Since we left the house, she didn't say a single word. We walked for so long we were no longer in the city and the sky was turning dark. Eventually, we followed this path through the woods. At first, there was some people jogging or walking their dogs, but the longer we walked, the fewer people we saw. Hours later, we finally got to our destination. And to my surprise, it was a cozy wooden house. One of the first things I noticed about the house was that it had a little playground with swings, slides, and other things, though everything looked old and forgotten, as if other kids had previously lived there, many years ago. I did ask the woman if other kids were around. She immediately replied by shaking her head. She had been quiet all this time, so it definitely took me by surprise when she decided to break the silence. Welcome to our house. Here you'll find everything you want. Sorry I didn't introduce myself earlier. I'm Thelma, your new mom. I also apologize if I was quiet. I just have to be alert. You never know when you could find a good prey, she said with a revealing smile. For a minute or two I was too busy looking at the house, but once I processed what she said, I asked her what she meant. I don't know if you noticed, but there are plenty of useful stuff around. We live pretty far away, so we must find ways to feed ourselves. There's lots of animals about. So, my sweet little boy, there's no way you're gonna starve. You just need to be clever and hunt them down. Do not worry, I'll teach you how to do that." I guess she was right. Besides, I was so excited when I heard about all these new things I was going to learn. I didn't really care about anything else. All I wanted to see was the rest of my stuff. Last but not least, we visited my room. You see, I never had toys, never even had a room, and now I had so many toys, books, and even a soft bed. I was mesmerized going through the hunting and dissection materials when Thelma, had been silently staring at me, spoke again. "With me, you can have all you want, all you've ever dreamed of. Nevertheless, there's just one place where you shouldn't go, for I'm the only one allowed. And that's the basement, my dear child. Please, listen to that. My clever son, please be careful. I am everything but dumb. Sadly, I know it all. Do not try to trick me. I will be aware if you ever go. Do not lie to me. Do not release the demon in me," she said, looking very frustrated, almost in pain. Even though I thought it was a weird statement, and it had me a little worried, I quickly brushed it off. I had things to look at. Plus, I was too young to actually understand the magnitude of her words and whether it was true or not. After some days, I got to know Thelma better. She was a bit weird and spent a lot of time deep in the woods hunting, but I did notice in her tone of voice that she really cared about me, even though it is difficult to read the face of someone who never took off her sunglasses. Thelma taught me how to dissect better and how to hunt. She hunted with me during the day, and on her own during the night. Most moms would be terrified by these things, but not my mama. She always encouraged all my interests, no matter how twisted. Whenever we were hunting, she used to tell me I should miss the heart and the head. I know, it sounds weird considering these two parts are the most effective when it comes to killing, but Mama didn't like simple things. She used to say if something was easy, then it wasn't fun. Sometimes she even caught animals with her bare hands. She was so fast and so skilled, and surprisingly, the sunglasses never interfered. Socializing with others wasn't our strongest skill. Luckily for me, she never forced me to go to school. In fact, it wasn't necessary because she knew it all. An open encyclopedia, and that's what she was. So full of talent, so full of skills. I was lucky. Mama Thelma taught me all these things. Everything around was nice and almost perfect at first. But like always, there is a point where things change. Some call it destiny, and some call it fate. By the time I was 16, I was no longer a child. There were some things, toys and tricks could no longer buy. I had the sensation growing inside of me. 8 years, and I still didn't get to go to the basement. 8 years, and she never took me hunting at night. 8 freaking years, and I never saw her eyes, for she always wore those sunglasses, even when it was dark. And that was the main thing that used to get me completely mad. I didn't care so much when I was a child, but after many years, new thoughts were running through my head. I wanted to know who Thelma was before becoming my mom. I knew. I couldn't take it anymore. My curiosity had overgrown. Mama constantly reminded me of what she said, as when we first got to the house many years back. In fact, she did it whenever she was about to go out. Every time I wanted to go to the basement, her words from 8 years ago immediately bombarded my mind. I knew I needed a plan, and that's when I thought. She always said not to go to the basement. Nevertheless, she never mentioned anything about going to her room. As a matter of fact, I've been there many times before. If I needed answers, I was sure that going there I could find them. One evening, as soon as Mama left, I ran into her room. I searched everywhere I could and opened every single thing. Thanks to that, I made a couple of discoveries. There were some documents such as licenses and passports under various names such as Igor and Yuri and Lean and Frank and Thelma Smith. Judging by Thelma's passport, it was definitely my mama. Same hair, same nose, same lips, and in addition, I could finally see her eyes. They were blue as the sky, just as I thought. But what the hell was she trying to hide? The loss of an eye? The second discovery was a picture of a woman and 2 little children. Thanks to the passports I had previously seen, I could recognize the woman was Yukarina Janovic, and the children were Igor and Yuri. The pictures had a date written on the back, 1989, the same year that I moved here. It took me a couple of minutes to realize that the pictures had a very familiar background. They were taken at this house. To be exact, they were taken in our playground. That meant Mama had definitely lied since day one. Children did live in this house. I memorized everything I discovered, every name, every face, every detail, for I knew I could not take these objects with me, and somehow I had the feeling this information would be useful one day. I cleaned and organized all evidence, and just like that, I concluded my first day of investigation. My hopes of finding something that could have stopped these thoughts had vanished. After all I had discovered, they only intensified. The room was only in advance, but the basement, well, that would be the final goal. The day had finally come, the one that changed it all. I did the same as before and waited until Mama left. It took me a few minutes to actually do something, but once I put my fears away and grabbed my torch, I walked down to the basement, full of confidence. Confidence I seemed to have lost many years ago. I came to the realization that I had become soft, but with this act of bravery, I would hopefully prove myself wrong. I walked down the stairs that led to the basement, and to my surprise, things were going to be easier than I thought. The basement door was wide open. It was all too easy. But at the time, I was so naive I couldn't tell this was nothing but a trick. As I entered the room, I immediately found something very odd. There were some large objects hanging from the ceiling. I walked deeper into the room and pointed at them with my torch for a better look. That's when I found out they resembled cocoons. There were 6 to be exact, some bigger than others. I placed my hand on the closest one. It had a sticky texture that resembled a spider's web. I'd never seen such a thing. I was really looking forward to know what was inside. But there was only one way to find out. I knew. I had to peel them open. Unexpectedly, as I opened one, I started to notice a very distinctive shape. The shape of human legs. I threw up and thought to myself I should go away, but I knew I had come too far. I just couldn't stop. Investigating further, I wasn't wrong. It was the body of a man. I put away my disgust and examined the whole thing. At first sight, everything seemed normal. But once you looked at its face, it was grim, and the body was incomplete. And what do I mean by that? Well, his eyes were missing. It looked almost as if they had been perfectly removed. He had no signs of trauma around them. Trying not to throw up, I moved to the next body. I needed to be fast. The second cocoon contained the body of a young woman. Same thing as before. No eyes to show. In between the gags and coughs, I did the same with each one until I had seen 5. And curiously, every single one had its eyes missing. I recognized the body of a man, 2 women, and 2 children. And I knew clearly who they were. They were the people from the documents Mama kept. Igor, Yuri, Ekterina, Lynn, and Frank. Mama had killed them all. Though, there was one more cocoon to see. I was in denial, but deep down, I knew who it would turn out to be. I slowly peeled open the last one. My mind was blank and full of ideas, but I was definitely not ready for what I saw. The last cocoon contained my mom. There was no mistake. Same hair, same height, same skin. If this was the real Thelma, then who was the other one? I didn't know how to confront the situation, but I knew the best thing I could do was run. I quickly stood up, hoping to be able to escape, but as soon as I turned around, she was already there. Mama, Thelma, the hunter, the killer, however you want to call her. She looked just like always, with the exception of one big thing. The sunglasses were finally gone. I guessed she had nothing else to hide anymore. She was definitely not missing an eye. The problem is that she had more than 2. And to simplify things, her body was that of a human, with the exception of where her eyes are normally located. They were all little and disgusting, just like spiders' eyes. She rapidly walked up to me. It was clear she was ready to attack. I tried to defend myself with the torch by pointing at her face, and she fell to the floor as she screeched in pain. I took advantage of this and ran away. Up the stairs, through the house and out the door, running for my life. As I entered the woods, I could hear something chasing me, but I didn't look back. I just kept running as fast as I could. Eventually, her speed surpassed mine. She jumped on me, we both fell to the ground. She had me pinned, and I tried to fight her back, putting my arms around her body. We were so close, I could see every single detail of her face. Some of her multiple eyes resembling the eyes of the people I found in the basement. I was terrified to think mine were about to become part of her collection, so I decided to attack back. With one of my arms, I grabbed the fallen branch that was laying on the ground and directed it straight to Thelma's eyes. And how did I know they were hers? Well, They were the only blue ones on the creature's face. Her screech was even stronger than before, and suddenly, her blue eyes seemed to have gone. Not only Mama's eyes disappeared, but her body had changed its form. Thelma now looked like a man. I froze completely, contemplating what was in front of me. It was Frank, from the passports, coming straight at me. As he came close, he opened his mouth, and I noticed his teeth had turned into fangs. Such a creepy movement made me react instantly. I raised the branch in my left hand, and as he came close, I stabbed the creature's hazel eyes, for I was more than sure those belonged to Frank. The same thing as before had happened again. He screamed and agonized in total pain. Seconds later, Yuri was standing before me. Yuri was the smallest one. He resembled the 6-year-old, and he was different to the other forms. He didn't try to attack me. As a matter of fact, he looked perplexed and started to cry. I almost felt bad for Yuri, and for a second, I was going to help him until I remembered this wasn't really him. I wasn't going to act soft again. I wasn't going to risk my life anymore. I left as fast as I could, but this time, I didn't hear anyone following me back. I ran the whole night. I ran until it was no longer dark. And hours later, I finally saw the road, the same one I took so many years ago. As soon as I saw people around, I felt free to collapse, and that was my last memory of that night. I woke up 2 days later in the hospital, wondering if everything had been a dream. But once I saw all the scratches, I knew it couldn't be. I didn't want it to find me again. I had to run away. The same day, I escaped the hospital. I knew that's what I had to do before police or doctors asked me any questions. I mean, who the hell is going to believe what I have been through? The story of a John Doe lost in the woods many years ago, who escaped from an evil, semi-spider, semi-human creature. Hell, I didn't even know how to describe this creature. And even if I did, I was going to end up getting locked up somewhere. After escaping the hospital, I hitchhiked to the south. I shaved my head and worked somewhere for 2 months until I had enough money to move to Mexico. And thanks to living with the Riveras, I spoke Spanish. So very soon after my arrival to Guadalajara, I started to work at a meat factory. I met a beautiful woman, which name I won't mention, and after a year of relationship, we got married. In our honeymoon, my wife got pregnant, and 9 months later we welcomed our daughter. I lived life as normal as I could for 6 years. But lately, I have felt very uneasy. I decided to tell my wife the truth. And would you believe, surprisingly, she really understood. We went to a paranormal expert, and they helped us identify Thelma. He classified her as a mythological creature known as an arcane, a half-human, half-spider creature. Some of these creatures look like humans in their upper parts, and as a spider in the lower body and legs, while some others look completely human with the exception of their eyes. He explained that the second variation of the creature, the one I encountered, is way more complex and powerful than the first. They sustain themselves by stealing people's eyes, for when they do, They steal their appearance and their souls. These creatures normally take the appearance of the last person they killed. However, there's a phenomenon that can occur when a strong emotion is shown by the captured soul. It can interfere with the creature's actions. As an example, Yuri was so afraid he had full control of the body, and I was able to escape. The man also explained that the soul of Thelma, who was the creature's last victim, constantly manifested and kept me safe. Or, at least until that fateful day. I guess I'll never know every single detail about my life. But I'm glad that after all that, I did have a mom. Maybe not under the best circumstances, but it was better than nothing. It might be difficult to understand, but for someone who's been neglected their whole life to know that there was someone looking after you, well, it meant a lot. After the appointment with the man, I have to admit, I felt a glimpse of hope. My wife and I went to pick up my daughter from school, but once we got home, something very strange occurred. We were sat at the table when my daughter said, "Daddy, I'm so sorry. I forgot to tell you my friend Yuri said he is happy to see you again."